Hello everybody and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at the US electoral map before the pandemic hit the United States versus how it looks now. Now obviously there are even more factors going into the current electoral map than just the pandemic itself, given the societal and political unrest in the United States right now, with Donald Trump's dwindling approval numbers and significantly dropping national polling numbers versus Joe Biden. So let's get right into it, starting out from left to right, looking at this is the pre-pandemic map. So this is basically around early to mid-February. That is when the pandemic first hit the United States, and by mid-March it was recorded in all US states that there was a confirmed case. So this is basically the time frame of this electoral map is early to late February. Starting out with the state of Nevada. Now Nevada was always a lean state in favor of Joe Biden. Now this is a state that is usually hard to predict and hard to poll. So mostly you have to go off how it voted in 2016, where Hillary Clinton defeated Donald Trump in the state of Nevada despite losing nationally, or at least in the swing states nationwide, not necessarily in the popular vote where she did win. So this is a state that, unless Joe Biden sees some significant drop in his polling numbers, if he's actually going to win the popular vote by 6 to 8 points, maybe even 8 to 10 where he is at right now, then there is absolutely no chance that Nevada does not go to Joe Biden, and it could be that we see Nevada turn into a likely state for the Democrats by the margin of victory in November if things continue to spiral out of control as they are right now. But as of February, it was a lean state in favor of Joe Biden. Now Arizona is the first time where we actually see a difference from the start of February to as things stand right now. In February, or early February specifically, it was still considered a tilt state in favor of the Republicans. It was a state that the Democrats were growing more and more optimistic they could possibly flip in the 2020 election, but it was still considered a little bit too conservative given the 2008, 2012, and 2016 results for the Democrats to realistically flip the state. Now obviously at the end of the video, when we look at today's electoral map, you're going to see something very, very different. As for the states of Colorado and New Mexico, they were both considered lean in favor of the Democratic Party at that point. Not much has changed nowadays, obviously, but for now, I'm going to just focus on the start of February, and then we can look at the changes between the two maps at the end of the video. Moving on to the state of Texas, it was considered a likely state for the Republicans. The Democrats were obviously somewhat optimistic that they could be a little bit more competitive in the state of Texas than they were 4 years ago in 2016 with Hillary Clinton, but they didn't have any idea who their nominee was going to be. Now keep in mind, at the beginning of February, Bernie Sanders seemed like the favorite to win the 2020 Democratic nomination. So that obviously had a big impact on the swing states, and more specifically the more conservative swing states such as Texas and Georgia, maybe Iowa and Ohio, as well as Florida, that couldn't really be forecasted that well, given that we didn't know who the Democratic nominee was going to be. However, moving on to the state of Georgia, as things stood, it was a lean in favor of the Republican Party. Obviously, Donald Trump won in the state by about 5 points, which is a lot lower of a margin than a lot of people give Hillary Clinton credit for in the state of Georgia. I mean, it was very, very close. And looking at the electoral map now, obviously I know I wasn't going to mention it until the end of the video, but Georgia is extremely, extremely competitive, and I don't think people truly understand the extent to which Georgia is extremely competitive in the 2020 election. And in the state of Florida, it was tilt in favor of the Republicans there as well. So as you can see, there's a growing theme of these key swing states such as Arizona and Florida. Maybe you can consider Georgia as well, and Texas. They were a lot more conservative than they are right now, because there was no real idea of how who the Democratic nominee was going to be. The economy was booming. Donald Trump's approval numbers were at a near all-time high. Things couldn't have looked really better for the Republicans for their 2020 election prospects as things stood. As for the state of North Carolina, now it was a lean in favor of the Republican Party at this point. People were thinking that Donald Trump could actually improve upon his numbers in North Carolina from 2016. As for the states of Virginia, it was likely in favor of the Democratic Party. Obviously, Hillary Clinton won in the state by a significant margin, and the state is moving more and more left. And so the Democrats, even at that point with Donald Trump's high re-election chances, they were very optimistic they could win in the state of Virginia. As for the states of Iowa and Ohio, they were both lean in favor of the Republican Party. Now, Donald Trump won both states by lean margins in the 2016 election after they went Democrat in both 2008 and 2012. And all things were pointing towards another repeat of 2016, where Donald Trump finds significant success in the states of Iowa and Ohio. His polling numbers were high there, and polling numbers were actually high there as well against any Democratic candidate that was. As for the state of Wisconsin, now this was a tilt in favor of the Republican Party at this point in time. The state of Wisconsin was obviously a tilt margin for Donald Trump in 2016 over Hillary Clinton, and he was looking good in polling numbers there against Joe Biden, against Bernie Sanders, against any of the possible Democratic candidates. He was looking reasonably well in the state of Wisconsin. Things were pointing towards a possible repeat of the win that he had in 2016. Now, however, as for the states of Michigan and Pennsylvania, now they were both tilt in favor of the Democratic Party, but you could actually argue that the state of Pennsylvania was almost an effective toss-up at this point. Given that we did not know that Joe Biden would become the eventual nominee or the presumptive nominee, and the home state factor that he has in the state of Pennsylvania, as well as just his high approvals and high polling numbers in a state like Pennsylvania or in the state of Michigan, that is, we did not know that the states of Michigan and Pennsylvania would be trending so much further and further Democratic as things went along in the polls. And thus, Michigan was only a tilt in favor of the Democrats, and Pennsylvania was an effective toss-up between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Now, as for the states of New Hampshire and the state of Maine, now New Hampshire was still a tilt in favor of the Democratic Party. Hillary Clinton won there by marginal numbers in 2016, much closer than I think a lot of people would have expected in the state of New Hampshire. It was in many ways an overlooked swing state in the 2016 election, but as things stood at that point, it was a tilt in favor of the Democratic Party. A lot of people could have possibly labeled it as a toss-up in many cases. As for the state of Maine, it was still a likely in favor of the Democrats. As for its second congressional district, it was more of a lean to maybe more of a tilt in the second congressional district of Maine. So as you can see right now, Donald Trump had 269 electoral votes to Joe Biden's 248, although he actually had a lean margin in the second congressional district of Nevada, which does bring him to the 270 mark over Joe Biden's 248 as things stood in the start of February to the middle part of February. Now keep in mind, this was basically as Donald Trump's approvals were on the bounce back. They were nearing all-time highs. He had a significant chance at re-election. Everything was looking good for him before the pandemic hit the United States, and then things went crazy, not just regarding the virus itself, but following all of the protests and all of the unrest and the spinning out of control of the United States as things are right now. Donald Trump could not have possibly foreseen what would happen in the following months. That has caused the next electoral map that I'm about to show you that looks significantly different and significantly worse than it did at that point. So let's look at it right now. Here you have the electoral map as things stand right now, and you can see a ton of differences from how they were looking at the start of February. Now Joe Biden holds 318 electoral votes to Donald Trump's 205. Starting out from left to right, you can see that Arizona has shifted to a tilt in favor of the Democrats. You can see that Texas and Georgia have shifted to now just tilt in favor of the Republicans from likely and lean, what they were before. As for the state of Florida, it has shifted from a tilt Republican to a tilt Democrat. North Carolina has gone from lean Republican to effective toss-up. Ohio has moved to tilt Republican. Minnesota has moved to likely Democrat. Wisconsin has moved from tilt Republican to tilt Democrat. Michigan has moved from tilt Democrat to lean Democrat. Pennsylvania has moved from toss-up to lean Democrat. All of these places have just moved significantly more in the favor of the Democratic Party given the national polling numbers and the approval numbers of the president versus Joe Biden. That is. Now we know that Joe Biden is the nominee. He was often plotted as the most electable candidate, and as things stand right now, it has shown to be true. Now you can debate whether or not Bernie Sanders would also be this far ahead at this point in time with Donald Trump's dwindling approval numbers, but that is not the debate that we are going to be having in this video, given that Joe Biden is the Democratic nominee for the 2020 election. But as you can see here, this is how the 2020 electoral map looks today versus how it looked in early February, which was vastly, vastly different. Nobody could have possibly foreseen what would happen with the economy, with the amount of people that have died in the United States, and with all of the societal unrest with the riots and the protests for the Black Lives Matter movement, which has gained significant traction and significant approval boosts over the past few weeks in a very short amount of time. All things point to a Joe Biden victory in November. Now, could things drastically alter in the other direction by then? Certainly they could. We haven't even gotten to any of the debates. We haven't even gotten to any of the party conventions where things could completely change and sway in favor of either party. But as things stand right now, this is the 2020 electoral map according to the data, according to historical polling numbers, according to historical election results, and keeping in mind that Donald Trump typically overperforms his polling numbers. So now keep in mind, this is the electoral map, even considering that Donald Trump does vastly overperform his political numbers. Now, if we were just going by polling numbers themselves, this map would look even more swayed in favor of the Democratic Party. So that is all for today's video. I hope you all enjoyed. Please make sure to like and subscribe and tune in next time, as well as comment any more video suggestions you have in the comment section down below. Thank you all so much. Tune in next time.